strange, mysterious feeling had shivered in him since morning. There had been a bad taste in his mouth. His hands would stop working the plane. His eyes would close. He went home and listlessly ate his supper. He lived at an old woman's, the widow of Ferenc Burka, in a bare little room which had once been a woodshed. That night, on the 4th day of October, 1874, at 1:15 in the morning, the journeyman carpenter John Kovac died. Two days later, they buried him. He left no wife, no child, no one but a cook living in Budapest in the service of a bank president by the name of Tordé. She was John Kovac's cousin. 5 years later, the old carpenter in whose shop he had worked died. And 9 years later, death took the old woman in whose shed he had lived. 14 years later, Tordé's cook, John Kovac's cousin, died. 21 months later, in the March of 1895, Navy sat around a red cloth table, drinking.
Denn ich habe riesen Durst, Durst, Durst. Und wenn ich habe jetzt dann sage ich ja,
Once, my friends, the corporal, he made a new recruit stick his head into the stove. Francie.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Kovac. John Kovac.
John Kovac.
That was the last time a human voice ever spoke the name of the carpenter. On November the 10th in 1899, a woman suffering from heart disease was carried into St. John's Hospital. She must have been about 45 years old. She lay there on the bed, quiet, terrified. She knew she was going to die. Staring wide into the dim light, she remembered a summer night in the country, and a gentle-eyed young man through whom that night she became a woman. In the mind of this dying woman, he silently appeared for a few moments. His face, his voice, the glance of his eyes now returned for the last time. 2 decades passed, and in 1920, a young lawyer sat making an inventory of his father's estate. He looked at every paper, every scrap. On one was written, "Received 4 florins 60 krasias, the price of 2 chairs, polished respectfully, Kovac, John." 3 days later, it rained. In the courtyard, the crumpled paper soaked through, and only this remained of it: Kovac J. The rain had washed away the rest. The letter J was barely legible. These last letters, the last lines, were the last speck of matter, all that remained of John Kovac. The V resisted longest, because there where the pen leaned hardest, Kovac had pressed. And in that instant, 49 years after his death, the life of the journeyman carpenter ceased to exist and forever disappeared from this earth. But for this,